for the preservation of liberty. And finally, Theodore Roosevelt said, "Thrice happy is a nation with a glorious history. It is far better to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to take rank among the poor spirits who have neither enjoyed much nor suffered much, because they live in the gray twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat." Words. Words that have inspired a nation, written by four men who saw all the possibility and potential for the future of this country. Words full of hope and the promise of freedom. Words full of liberty. But what is liberty? We grow up going to school learning about it. We read about it in our history books, and we even talk about it quite frequently. But what does liberty really mean? Now, liberty is defined as freedom from arbitrary or despotic government or control, or independence, or freedom from control, obligation, restriction, interference, or hampering conditions. The power or right of doing, thinking, or speaking according to choice. Now, yes, this is just a definition, but to this country, it would come to mean so much more, because it is everything this country was to be founded upon. Freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and freedom of speech. Benjamin Franklin, while not a president, but certainly an important figure in the founding of this country, expressed his views on liberty by saying, "Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom, and no such thing as public liberty without the freedom of speech." In George Washington and Thomas Jefferson's day, liberty was nothing more than a whisper, a goal eventually achieved through challenge, sacrifice, and determination. George Washington fought for liberty as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army during the American Revolution, and once again as the first President of the United States, as this country struggled for an identity. As he helped to lay the foundations for some of American government, he made sure that we would not forget that liberty was the cornerstone for this country, by saying liberty itself will find in such government, properly adjusted and distributed, its surest guardian. Thomas Jefferson fought for liberty through his words in a document called the Declaration of Independence, a document that would define a nation. While Jefferson's views of government were different from many of the other founding fathers, his ideas of liberty were the same. And like the other founding fathers, he worked to secure liberty for Americans. Even as third president of the United States, as he led this country through an expansion that would nearly double the size of the United States and forever affect the course of American history, Jefferson worked to secure liberty for Americans. But like Washington, he grew weary of this nation's ability to keep the idea of liberty alive. Once the novelty of independence wore off, would we remember the sacrifices made for our comfort? Jefferson warned that yes, we did create a near-perfect republic, but will they keep it? Or will they, in the enjoyment of plenty, lose the memory of freedom? Material abundance without character is the path of destruction. In Abraham Lincoln's day, 87 years after declaring our independence, the idea of liberty was already being taken for granted. Abraham Lincoln reminded us of this right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, striving to keep a nation together during the American Civil War. And by issuing an Emancipation Proclamation, he drew this nation one step closer toward a better and brighter future for later generations. Abraham Lincoln believed in the idea of liberty so much, he went so far as to say, "I have never had a feeling politically that did not spring from the Declaration of Independence, that all should be given an equal chance." He said, "This is a sentiment embodied in the Declaration of Independence, and I would rather be assassinated on this spot than surrender it." At the turn of the century, once again, the ideas of liberty were being taken for granted. Already the ideas and warnings given to us by our founding fathers were being discarded for a new mentality. Why not? It was the beginning of a new century where anything was possible and the people felt they were invincible. Theodore Roosevelt reminded us of this liberty once again as he saw this nation's potential in a role of leadership, and by securing economic freedom for everyone, by breaking up the big businesses and monopolies that had taken over the country at the time. But he also reminded us of liberty through the simple concept of conservation, setting aside large tracts of land so that people would have a place to come and enjoy the freedom of this country. Theodore Roosevelt was very passionate about conservation, and he wrote and spoke often on the subject, one of which he said, "I recognize the right of this generation to use and develop the natural resources of this land, but I do not recognize the right to waste them or rob with wasteful use the later generations that come after us." Since the beginning of its foundation, this country has been a country of contradiction, a country that was never expected to make it, a country often referred to as the Great Experiment, a country founded upon religious tolerance, but also a country that would defy the odds, nevertheless, to stand up and hold its own with the other nations that had come before it. And all because of men and women who came before us to show us what liberty was all about. People like these 4 presidents up here tonight. And yes, they did come from different backgrounds, from different beliefs, from different geographical locations, and even different periods in history. But they had one thing in common, a love for their country and an understanding of the importance of liberty to this country. Now I'd like to close this talk with one last quote. It's a quote that's a favorite of mine, and a quote that comes from a movie actually. And I wonder if any of you out there has ever heard of or seen the movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Anybody? All right, there's a few of you out there, that's great. Well, I do encourage each and every one of you to get a hold of a copy of this film, because it is just as relevant today as when it was filmed in 1939. And in that movie is a quote on liberty that I'd like to share with you tonight. "Liberty is too precious a thing to be buried in books. People should hold it out in front of them every single day of their lives and say, I am free to think and to speak. My ancestors couldn't, but I can, and my children will." Ladies and gentlemen, as we open on the decade of a still brand new century, I wonder if we have not started to take liberty for granted once again. And I'd encourage each and every one of you to stop and ask yourselves, what does liberty mean to me? Ladies and gentlemen, I present freedom, America's lasting legacy.